The US of A does not. Despite the fact I'm sure everyone will say you are a sellout, you are an idiot, and many other adjectives that they would describe me as. I know that if I can't do this right now, I'd be dishonoring all the men and women who are in harm's way right now, and all the men and women on this earth. And if there's any connection to your hyphenated, whether it be Italian American, Greek American, Chinese American, Filipino American, go down the list, people. What other civilization, what other empire, I beg you, it's not arrogance coming from this man. I've had to look at every aspect from the most evil to the most spiritual and science. It's a mixture of everything, and the fact that the world wants to basically, I know when I hear the academic side of economics, and there's voices out there, many to be respected. Along with this timeline, we need to ask, as everyone is asking, how do we go into this new world, this new age, this new renaissance? Yes, the Chinese are there. We all know that. And thank God. That history has much to learn, but it has equally, if not more, so that much to show and teach us. And there's no question, just like you and I and you and whomever, can't trust many people nowadays, even your family members, let alone those we call our friends. And if I've just said something so profane, because I am good with profanity, anyone who's heard the rest of my series. And I had a dear American friend, Mr. Lee, who showed me recently the culmination of all my experiences as a young baby boy who was born and raised in the RGV, the Rio Grande Valley. You all know we're here. MTV had much to putting us, at least on MTV. But Elon, which I know the world can't stand, plain and simple, thinks he is evil, a Nazi, and all the rest that I've caught through YouTube. And why is it relevant? Keep looking at that timeline. Go back. Really soak in the time, the points where you see certain things took place, and try to connect the dots as best you can, because although this is not a professional depiction that most likely ChatGPT would have helped me with, but I realize what the Chinese may not bring to the table. Everyone is competing. So can you blame China? No. Can you blame any other country for trying to get into that game? Forget whether you agree with it on some moral stance. Leave that issue out, the morality, leave out religion for just one moment, all religions. I think if you could pull yourself and forget the fact you may be any of those that you see there, it's simple. Most of humanity is pretty much locked into those key points on that image. And I don't think it would take a child to get it. Seriously. I think everyone that has been following us knows that my hero was James Baldwin. And I've tried to challenge everyone to tell me that I'm wrong. I think his voice is more for the moment right now than ever. Not his voice literally, but for a Mexican American to sit here and tell you that if it wouldn't have been for these three men, I would not be here and be able to proudly tell you that not all Americans are equal when it comes to the morality of any issue. And I don't think any human out there, regardless of what history and regardless of what culture, regardless of what country, regardless of what nation, could tell me that they're not guilty. No one. Unless I'm getting something wrong in everything I've learned anywhere, and you could either be laughing right now, which you have every right to, thank God. And because on my journey as a 66-year-old man, I had to account for why I didn't do well, academically, because I didn't. Every step of the way as a kid, being raised in a home of a middle class. No, they came on board with the dream of America's middle class, right? Of being a piece of that. And I was very fortunate to be raised by two people who worked every day. And as America freaks out, is the American dream, say some economics, people from the economic school of thought. And they're sure that we're done. And those that are more, I guess, grounded, because it is monopoly, either you win or you lose. And I've got my viewpoints on that. I just think the Chinese figured out, they figured out that game. They figured out monopoly and then said, if you know anything about that part of the globe, the culture there is, that's why I can't ever look at China and say, we don't need them, we don't want them. It would be naive, foolish. I've had those scenes from one of Hollywood's most remarkable films, from the Terminator series. That explosion, that visual, that kicked my ass when I first saw it in theaters. Theaters, folks, for those that still remember them. Yes, we're happy in virtual reality and virtual everything. It is cool. But I believe that as general AI keeps going forward, if we become that indifferent and we let fear, greed, or whatever else the fuck, excuse me, I did that deliberately. I'm nothing. But it wasn't the universities that failed me. It wasn't the schools that failed me. Every parent out there who knows that they are equally responsible for the outcome of how education is used, by whom it's used, how often and when, most relevant, and has nothing to do with so much subject matter that seems to preoccupy and distract Americans at the most unfortunate time. And since I told everyone, I've been spatting it out, I love the US of A. And it's not because I think they're better. There's no one on earth that has shown anything throughout all of history, known history. And I don't want to go into those other subject matters that we're questioning everything. We, as a species, we've evolved to such a point that either we want to open our eyes and be a part of an opportunity that I would think for those that believe in other subject matter and would die to prove it. I'm just grateful to have been lucky. And I could tell you from the people I grew up with in Chicago. I know that right now New York, Chicago, any large city outside of the red zone can't deny. There's an amount of chaos, but to me it's not connected to and even hard for me, revelation. And because I can't deny that it's a part of everything we talk about, because we cannot ignore what seems to be not clear. This is the end times. According to all Christians, regardless where they actually became Christians and at what point and by whose orders, but let's just back up on that timeline to that somewhere in that area, right? Yeah, I went from here to, it was personal, because I'm trying to tie in my personal life and why I could sit here and defend. I am known to have to defend. I believe anyone who's had the opportunity to taste what this experiment was like and what it brought to us, it should absolve Western civilization. Because quite honestly, and that's why I use the music, although they're not in the same, we're diatonic. So anyone who knows a bit about music, basically we're in a certain, I always talk about vibe, frequency. All music is tunable to A440. And so far, Western Civ has delivered a triumph of spirit. The Renaissance was not a waste, in my humble opinion. And if I learned anything from my hero, James Baldwin, forget the pen, thought, thinking, feeling, because that's what we can bring to that future. I know others would mock me right now for that statement, but who's at the forefront? A generation that has the best because of how they grew up and were fortunate enough to be part of that historic process that took place since Applebee's in Silicon Valley and all the places in the United States that have been hubs of technology. Most of us should know. Yes, we're running neck and neck, and who knows for sure. But the moment we leave the emotion, I can't speak for China in the sense of what their emotions are in general. A day in China, right? Let's look at it that way. What's the experience for an everyday Chinese person? I guess that would be the best way to frame it. Not to offend, just to ask the question, right? I've used the phrase, they're Borg-like with bling bling. And anyone who knows a little sci-fi, Borg. Again, that timeline is not just, as much as everyone has condemned Hollywood. And there's moral reasons, and there is also technically, it's because of technology, because of what we now have, and where AI is taking it. Everyone's offended. From artists, in fact, there's not one person who is screaming. My art career, my musician career, my musical career, my acting career, my this career, my that career. Jesus, Alvin Toffler warned us as a whole. Third Wave, 80-some, I can't remember, but that book, and even though he's an outright socialist, which when I heard that, I'm like, no, not Toffler, please. Seriously. And not because it was an ideological, because everything that I know says, but that's my point. It takes out of consideration human nature, which has always been an intellectual debate. And even greed, when one says, well, isn't that just the human nature of humans, regardless of race, creed, or color?